So here I am riding in a Chevy Blazer halfway around the world by myself to meet with a new client in the country of Colombia.
AJ had a customer who really loved his suits, and he said, hey, my boss loves what you're designing for me. He'd like to meet you.
I have absolutely no idea who I'm getting ready to see. And we pulled up to a ranch. So I walk in there and I was absolutely in shock. I was standing in front of my new client, Pablo Escobar. I thought, oh my God, here's a guy that I'd heard a lot about in the news. I really was not that comfortable. And there was an entire kilo of cocaine right there on the table. I thought, I hope I get out of this alive. I was sitting on a ranch of Pablo Escobar.
He said, Senor Pratt, I appreciate very much your beautiful work. I would appreciate if you would create the look that would enhance my chances of election for Congress, if that is okay with you. I said, that's fine with me.
AJ knew who the heck he was dealing with, the king of cocaine. But it was strictly to make clothes, because Escobar was also trying to be a somewhat mainstream politician and not, the street thug.
Pablo Escobar, he was the head of the Medellin cartel. In the early 1990s, I was one of the two lead investigators on the Medellin cartel and the demise of Pablo Escobar. He introduced a business model of drug trafficking that eventually made him responsible for 80% of the world's cocaine. His business model is, I'm telling you to do something. If you don't do it, I'm gonna kill you. And you know what? I might kill your family, your children, your dog. He's nothing more than a mass murderer in my book.
Pablo, the way I describe him, would be kind of like dress pants out of polyester. He didn't have anybody make his clothes as far as the way he looked. He was just an average-looking guy.
And AJ knew he could help change that a little bit by the clothes he wore. Escobar hated wearing a tie. So almost all the photos you see of Escobar, he's got, an open shirt. Except for the tie that AJ made for him.
Now, that first time you were there for how long?
For 3 days. We spent hours together because I've got to measure him and share with him what I am doing and get the approval of the wardrobe.
The fact that AJ could make suits that made him look presentable, like a businessman, pleased him. But AJ knew that it's not like Pablo was suddenly going to be some sort of clothes horse.
He said that Pablo was, as far as clothes is concerned, it was just kind of secondary.
How long before you then went back?
Within 90 days.
Oh, okay.
So Pablo and AJ became friends. They hit it off because they were two similar guys in a way. AJ had come from nothing. He'd come from the middle of nowhere, Arkansas. No electricity, no money, not a dime. Hitchhiked and became his own man. He made his own image. He became the person he wanted to be. And Pablo was similar in that he came from nothing and was the wealthiest man in the world at the time. But you have to remember, he was one of the most wanted men, as well as being the wealthiest man. So he couldn't fly to Vegas. So he lived vicariously through all these stories that AJ told about hanging out with celebrities and designing for showgirls.
If you're a criminal like Pablo Escobar, when somebody's telling you about a place known as Sin City, well, holy cow, that sounds like a place where they might enjoy cocaine, doesn't it? It's no doubt in my mind that the wheels started turning in Pablo's head, and he's thought, this is going to be my man in Las Vegas.
So I was back in Colombia delivering the wardrobes for Pablo. Pablo said, I'd like to make you a very, very good offer.
Pablo actually said to AJ, listen, you should get into the cocaine business and make as much money as you can right now while you're young so you can enjoy it as you get older, which is what I'm doing here.
Pablo said, if you had an airplane, you could not have to work very much longer in your life because I give you a special deal, $4,000 per kilo. Oh my God, I mean, Jesus.
And this is Pablo Escobar. Of course, that frightened AJ because he knew what kind of a man this was. But AJ thought he could make a lot of money.
Now, the thing to remember, too, is AJ started with nothing. AJ always said that he was someone who, when he saw an opportunity in front of him, he tried to maximize that opportunity.
At that moment, it sounded like more than I could handle. I had my fashion business going so well, but at the same time, my mind was going, yeah, he's right, he's right.
AJ did not always recognize consequences, and what the risk and reward was.
But I already, needless to say, was involved with very dangerous people in the mob. So the challenge and the excitement of the danger of this offer, it sounded very intriguing, very interesting. And after the things that happened to me when I was younger in Wichita, I basically was fearless.
What happened was he fell in love with a woman named Linda.
I met Linda when I was 20 years of age. She was petite, beautiful, very intelligent, and an extremely interesting young lady. And I was rather smitten with.
They went on to marry.
We started a family, and we had 2 kids, my son Todd and daughter Michelle.
They were a happy family here for a short time, but there was a tragedy that happened.
It was my daughter's birthday. As I was pulling in the drive, I could see Linda in the kitchen window. In her excitement, she ran around from the kitchen to the front door, out of the house, and the door starts to close on her, and she just used her elbow to shove the door aside, and her elbow just barely nicked that metal.
And she caught tetanus, and she later died of it in the hospital.
She died right there, laying in my arms. It was a tough time. I had so much pain in my being that I just went crazy.
He loved that woman with all his heart. And he said something came over me. And he said, I just didn't care anymore.
I changed almost like into a different person. I went from being conservative, really a personable good guy, to being very angry. It was just no holds barred.
He started talking differently, walking differently. He started to dress a very particular way. He got the mustache. He slicked back his hair. And he created AJ the Tailor.
My wife had died. I have these 2 children that were without a mother.
And his children were raised by our parents. And I do believe down the road it caused some relationship problems with the kids.
The choices I made after Linda died, becoming a different person and getting involved in all of this stuff, making all that money, I was just simply trying to cover the pain and suffering in my mind, creating something to make the pain go away. And so when Pablo asked me, what do you think of the deal? I considered it. I didn't have a plane, so how in the world am I going to do that? I said, is there any way some of your own people have a route close to Las Vegas? I would be very, very appreciative of it. And I mean, that's how I got in the cocaine business.
I returned to Las Vegas, and I was informed in Colombia that somebody would pick up part of the wardrobe that I was designing for Pablo. So one afternoon, a young man called for an appointment. I had him over to my studio. He had a box, and inside the box, 4 kilos of pure cocaine. And he said, this is for you. That was the first delivery that I knew that came directly from the source itself.
The introduction of cocaine to the United States was slow and gradual until Pablo Escobar came along.
Our top story tonight, cocaine. It's become the #1 illicit drug in the United States.
Cocaine is now becoming the in drug.
In the 1970s, cocaine kind of took the United States by surprise, especially law enforcement. Nobody really cared about it because they were worried about all the weed that was being imported from South America into South Florida. That was their focus. And so when cocaine came on the scene, well, cocaine already existed for medicinal purposes.
Although cocaine enters through a massive criminal network, there is virtually no evidence that cocaine users commit crimes to get it. Probably because cocaine, unlike heroin, is not physically addictive.
I think we know now they were completely wrong. We didn't know what we were in for.
Nobody knew, especially AJ, how cocaine would go over in Vegas, but it was a big hit right away.
The introduction of cocaine seemed like it happened overnight because once it got out there, everybody accepted it, especially the entertainment world.
The cocaine was exploding. That was something I could sell like hotcakes.
Of course, all of the connections that I had from making clothing, the showgirls, the working girls, valet guys, the pit bosses, anybody that was part of Las Vegas was all over me. Just to give you an idea of the volume, there was times in Las Vegas that I could go through a kilo of cocaine in less than 18 hours. The money was so sensational.
AJ realized he'd found something there in the cocaine business. When AJ used to come to town in Wichita, we'd party a little bit. Of course, he was such a salesman, he'd start telling a big story about it and how great it was. And then we'd both have a little taste of it. Time just slips away. You don't even know where time's at. And next thing you know, I was working at the time. I had to get up and go to work. No sleep, no nothing, but I'd do it.
He's selling out of this cocaine instantly. So in order to keep that up, Pablo's sending him shipments through his guys.
And now I have two of these guys making these trips from Colombia. And I was using flight attendants, especially in South American countries.
He actually set up a cartel of his own, where the delivery people, the so-called mules, were stewardesses. And they would travel from Miami or Fort Lauderdale in particular to various other places, Denver, Chicago, Cleveland, where AJ then had someone else to just simply pick up the suitcase. He had a whole system set up. But not everybody knew everything. People knew only their little piece, so that if anything ever happened, it would never come back to him.
I never considered myself a drug dealer. Just because I would never sell anything to anybody that didn't have one hell of a lot more to lose than I did.
He compartmentalized his life. It was his way of not taking responsibility for what he was doing, which made it easier to live.
Selling cocaine gave AJ a world of possibilities that not even the mob could offer him, and certainly making clothing for people could not offer him.
I never let anybody know anything about the cocaine. I was just known because of my fashion business and the respect that was paid me.
He was measuring the inseams of some of the most dangerous people on the planet. The mob knew that he always seemed to have access, but they did not know the extent of his involvement with the cocaine happening in Vegas. He did not want them to know that because he knew that they would be knocking on his door and saying, hey, we want a piece of that.
Once you are into the mob, once you're involved with things, you do realize you're expected to be loyal to the family.
As far as keeping my reputation clean, I put into the mob clients, that's top priority. I made sure I was always on time with them.
So there's the old mob who supposedly was not interested in the drug trade. But there was a new crew. Spilotro was one of the younger people who were willing, if it made money, why not, kind of thing. What's the harm?
They got on the street and they wanted it.
Now, in AJ's case, he understood that if the mob, Spilotro, found out what was really going on with the cartels, they would end up getting very angry at him. That's a sign of disrespect, and it could be a big problem for him.
That's really risky. Because the people around him, AJ couldn't control who's talking to who. These are the guys who are going to roll over on them. They're going down, not them.
I'd been called over to have breakfast at the Tropicana, and Joe Augusto was there. Joe was entertainment director, and he was handling the skimming from the Tropicana for the bosses in Kansas City, Chicago, and other areas. And I heard him make a statement like, "The balls this guy's got, the nerve this guy's got." It scared the hell out of me. I was at the breakfast room in the Tropicana, and Joe Augusto says, "The balls this guy's got, the nerve this guy's got."
AJ was living a very risky life. They found out that AJ was making all this money off this cocaine, and he wasn't cutting them in on the deal. So it wouldn't be good.
But AJ was very lucky the mob didn't know about his drug smuggling and his double life, because their focus was dealing with bigger issues with the FBI. So the FBI had finally got on the tail of the mob and their skimming operation that was happening in Vegas.
How do you explain your money? If you are skimming, it's illegal. Remember, that's how they got Capone, tax evasion. They were skimming a lot of money out of Las Vegas, and that's helping to finance a lot of the other things they do. So you might think of it as something like a flow chart. It's circling around. Las Vegas money goes here. This money comes to Las Vegas for them to do this. But Las Vegas is crucial.
We were doing some business. And DeLuna, with his big mouth and talking about things he shouldn't be on the phone.
Federal agents, they have a wiretap on Tuffy DeLuna.
Joe Augusto and DeLuna ran the Tropicana Hotel for the Savellas.
On the wiretap, they're discussing some sort of murder. That's what their wiretap is for. But then they're able to get Tuffy explaining, oh, this is how we do the skim. And this is what we do and when we do it and why we do it. I can just imagine the guy sitting there with the headsets on going, they had struck the mother lode.
And then the Nevada Gaming Commission let them be aware of it. We don't want you here no more.
The hotel owners were told, you need to relinquish your ownership of certain hotels, or else we're going to close them down.
That left these guys with 30 days to sell the Tropicana in order to reclaim the money they had invested in it. Otherwise, they would lose hundreds of millions of dollars. But they couldn't just sell to anyone. The Nevada Gaming Commission had to approve of the buyer.
The mob found one legitimate buyer, and that was the squeaky clean Ramada Inn Corporation. But they also needed a broker to be the middleman to make this deal happen. So the Ramada Inn sends someone to Vegas to broker the deal.
Joe Augusto says last night at dinner, this guy representing the Ramada Inn pissed him off. And he said, oh yeah, that little son of a bitch, I'm going to whack him. And finally, I got the story out of him.
So the night before, the CEO of the Tropicana and Augusto and their dates, they had made dinner arrangements with this guy to talk about buying the Tropicana. In comes this guy with his fiancee, just takes a look around the table for just a few seconds, and he snaps his fingers, and he summoned the maitre d'. He said, I want to be moved from this table. I want to sit with these animals. So they actually got up from the table and were seated someplace else.
I mean, you can't do anything that is more disrespectful to a person in the family.
Oh, I mean, Joe Augusto was boiling. He was just going to put a contract on him just because of how this guy treated him with disrespect the night before. What I could just quickly see was you're not going to make a sale by the deadline if somebody's got a contract out on him.
So AJ had a vested interest in this deal happening. The mob who's financing his fashion business, they would lose millions of dollars if this deal doesn't happen. So it really came down to having his business do well.
The next thing, I hear one of the guys said, where's this guy from? They said, somewhere in Kansas. That got my attention.
And it turned out AJ knew the guy. He had done suits for him in Wichita.
He'd known him for years.
Joe Augusto looks and he said, call this guy, see if this is the guy you know. So I pick up the phone and he says, who's calling? I said, this is a voice from the past. He says, like what past? And I said, Wichita, Kansas. And I said, this is AJ Pratt. He said, where are you? I said, I'm down in the breakfast room. You get up here.
As soon as he said that, the mob guy said, make this deal.
And they say, if you can do this, we will make you the cleanest made man ever.
And I knew that I would also get a little bit of respect from the Kansas City side.
AJ was supremely confident. He believed that he could talk his way out of just about everything.
So I went up to his suite.
And the broker has no respect for the mob, okay? He doesn't care. He's like, those guys, they don't have any class. I don't want to deal with these people.
He says they don't even know how to hold a knife and fork in the right position. He says this is a bunch of heathens, and he was really mad. And I knew him more than just well. I knew how he thinks and his extreme nature of high rolling, which proved to be quite an advantage because he really, really liked the blow.
AJ has cocaine. They do some. The guy's like, where'd you get this?
I told him Pablo Escobar. Well, he about fell out of his chair there.
This guy loved it. So he said, I'll do this deal on one condition. He says that you take my plane and fly to Columbia and bring me back as much as you can get.
He says, I've got a twin-engine Navajo with holes in his left hand, the keys to the Navajo. He says, if you could use this, have at it.
It's so crazy over the top that a guy hands over the keys to his plane. It's not like I'm giving him my car keys.
Right. That's the story I was told. I mean, it's crazy. AJ could make you believe anything he told you. So I wasn't aware of a lot of things at the time. I was told many things later in life. His stories were so far out, I mean, but they were so believable.
I just couldn't believe it. But I remember clearly that Pablo, the last words he said to me when I left Columbia the last time I saw him is that if you have an airplane, I give you a special deal per kilo. I mean, I hadn't really put the airplane in my mind until that moment, but it really opened up the avenues of the cocaine business.
So, according to AJ, the one guy who can broker this deal to sell the Tropicana to a huge hotel chain says, I will make this deal with you on one condition. You take my plane, fly it to Pablo in Colombia, stuff it with cocaine, and bring it back for us to sell.
So actually, that's not true. I'm always skeptical of what any interview subject tells me. And I try to check any facts I can check. In this case, what had happened was there were two different people. The broker for the hotel chain was a businessman, somewhat shady. He had a long history of odd real estate deals. This other guy, the one who offered AJ the plane, was a Wichita oil man who did a lot of cocaine, but he had nothing to do with the Hotel Tropicana deal. Now, both of them did cocaine with AJ and did a lot of it, but they were definitely two different people. I asked AJ, what's your explanation for that? And he said, I'm sorry, I that's the way I remember it.
I think I'm kind of fine with that because AJ was the penultimate storyteller. We all want a good story, and it's okay to go along for the ride.
It's a memoir. It's not a biography. It's his story the way he sees it.
So back to the plane.
This guy liked the cocaine so much, he actually gave AJ the keys to his nearly new airplane. AJ's not a pilot. Like, he thought, what am I going to do? I don't know how to fly an airplane.
But he also saw an opportunity in front of him to expand his own business, cocaine smuggling. But how do you do that? He wasn't an expert in this business. He's just starting out.
Well, the real deal is cocaine's not the first thing AJ ever smuggled. He smuggled silk.
He actually snuck into China at a time when there was an embargo to find silks that they needed for these showgirls.
I do a lot of designing with silk, and I've always known the best silk in the world is in Shanghai, China. And those days it was a shopping extravaganza. Things that you could buy for the prices and the quality was incredible. But we were in a Cold War with China. It's impossible to get these silks. So I thought, well, how can I smuggle the silk from the People's Republic of China into a duty-free port, which was Hong Kong. I already had a number of contacts in Hong Kong that I had designed for it. So I had people to help, and I came up with a method. I would wrap the silk around the waist of somebody that could be trusted.
And then he put them on a train and sent them to Hong Kong. Once in Hong Kong, he unwrapped all the silk from them and took it back with him.
And as soon as I returned to Las Vegas, there was 723 calls waiting for me.
His business expanded because he had the silk, which nobody else had, and maybe he saw the same opportunity with the cocaine.
So once AJ's got a plane, where is he going to go? Because he doesn't know how to fly a plane.
He went back to Wichita because my dad got a job at Boeing.
So I had a friend that was me as the chief mechanic. My plans was to talk to this guy.
He's asking all these questions about a plane. How much fuel does it need? How far can it fly? What kind of weight can it carry, etc.? And a guy overhears him.
And he says, well, I think I know what you want this airplane for.
He stuck his hand down. My name is Barry Seal.
Barry Seal was one of the major smugglers in the 70s and the early 80s. Very successful, but we never caught him with a load. That's success.
Barry Seal was a savant when it came to flying. Understand he got his pilot's license, soloed at a very young age, became one of the youngest pilots in command at TWA Airlines, but he also had an extremely adventuresome side.
The exciting thing in life to me is to get into a life-threatening situation, and that's excitement.
It turned out that smuggling was what he chose to do. When I started working on this case for the FBI, Barry's first smuggling was mostly marijuana. And then he got involved in taking munitions allegedly down to Mexico. He was a good pilot. He had his skills and he used them.
He had the reputation of being able to land a plane and take off in a plane from almost anywhere.
You wonder how all of this would happen to one guy. And the only thing I could come up with is it was just a wild coincidence that AJ met those people. That was his life.
Honestly, I can't remember ever feeling more comfortable about another human being. Only thing in his mind from day one when he's born was to fly. And he says, if you have an aircraft that's clean, never had eyes on it, meaning like the eye in the sky type thing, Pablo has really opened the doors to heaven to you. That was the magic words to me, so I said, let's do it.
These guys agree that they will empty out their bank accounts and put all their money into rigging planes so they can stuff it with more cocaine to get it from Colombia back to the U.S.
This was totally new to me. But Barry Seal, of course, he aeronautically and stuff, he already knew what he was doing.
How much did you pick up at that first trip?
Oh, how many kilos did we pick up?
Exactly.
15. We were there less than 30 minutes on the first one. That would be the most we was ever on the ground. And so that was the first trip. Everybody is happy and excited. I got a lot of respect.
AJ said the deal went through. The mob sold the Tropicana, and the guy's life was spared, thanks to AJ. So AJ becomes the cleanest made man in mob history, but this deal only went down because of his cocaine business. And the mob was still in the dark about the cocaine business. So his victory was basically a betrayal of the mob.
I have no evidence that that story is true. I don't know the end of that deal, the contracts. There's no indication that that happened. It sounds improbable to me. But again, who would even make that up?
I felt 100 times more safe with anything that I did with Pablo than I did with the mob.
AJ was very aware what they could potentially do to him.
Now, you disrespect somebody in the mob, that could be your life.
There's the story that AJ, as he was told, could become the cleanest made man in mob history by negotiating the sale of the Tropicana, or at least making the sale possible. Did it actually happen? It's AJ's story, and he was sticking to it.
AJ and Barry Seal started doing business, and then all of a sudden, Las Vegas was overloaded with cocaine. He saw the demand, and he supplied it.
What really at that time was going on, fashion was my lead item for sale. Fashion would be my introductory for this next item I have for you to kind of kick things up a notch. So the fashion would bring me in, and then the cocaine would just absolutely be an added bonus. The fashion business was pretty well established.
You know, he's very, very popular. He's designing for these mobsters, for their wives, for their friends, for celebrities, even politicians.
Clothing for Richard Nixon, made him a tuxedo. Even Elvis Presley.
Elvis was really good looking and the most exciting client of mine. The first time that I met Elvis, this was before even I moved to Las Vegas. I was at a party over in Beverly Hills. Music and magic and party and fun, come on, come on. Music and magic and party and fun, come on, come on.
A man came over to AJ and told him there was a guy who wanted to meet him.
And I turned further to my left, and much to my surprise, it was Elvis Presley.
He looked me over and he said, "Oh man, she sure dressed cool." I said, "Oh, well, I'm extremely flattered." I got almost a little shy, fell, because it was the biggest star in the world, throwing compliments to me. He said, "You make those clothes, man, would you ever consider doing something for me?" And I said, "I would be honored at any time you'd like for me to start." He said, "As quickly as possible." So I made an appointment with him the following day. I made him 3 pairs of velvet slacks. There's several shirts for him. I made him a little half boot.
So you did the stage clothes for him or personal clothes?
Oh, yeah, I did both. The Eagle jumpsuit was for the Aloha Hawaii show.
AJ put Elvis in his first jumpsuit. Up until then, he was wearing tuxedos with sequins and all that. They're backstage, and he said, "You know, I got an idea for you."
I made 2 complete jumpsuits, 2 complete belts, those big, thick belts, with all of the hardware on it.
I saw it on one of your the photos you sent. You had an invoice.
You've got a paid in full invoice by Vernon Presley.
Yes.
That's what you have.
Yeah.
That was what Elvis ordered.
That changed Elvis's whole image on stage. He never was on stage again without a jumpsuit. I mean, AJ did all this. That was crazy.
But see, that's another thing where not everything made sense. There's no question that Bill Ballou designed and inspired, that famous Elvis jumpsuit.
So my question, though, is, Bill Ballou designed the first jumpsuit. When did you get involved?
Bill Ballou had the contract, and Peter designed the original jumpsuit.
Okay.
But Bill was not a needle worker, and so I had gone in partnership with him.
It makes a better story for AJ for him to be the prime mover of Elvis's jumpsuit or whatever, when in fact he might have been, the second tier person. But the fact is he was involved. But AJ just gave himself a little more credit, perhaps, than he deserved.
I also made the scarves. Now, this scarf story it's an important story because the scarf became a trademark of his show.
August is, what I understand, he's the first one to do the scarves. In 2005, he had one of them on eBay. And I'm a collector of Elvis stuff, so I bought it off him. He called me right up. We talked for 2 hours, and he told me the stories about Elvis. And that's how August and I became friends.
Elvis, he had glaucoma. He'd be sweating so much, he couldn't see the end of the stage. He could not see the audience. So one night, a lady took a silk scarf that she was wearing from around her neck, a very elegant silk scarf, and she passed it to Elvis, and Elvis used the silk scarf to wipe his face, and it was amazing because it felt good against his skin. So he turns around to his best friend. He says, "Get the tailor. We got to have these silk scarves made."
And then that's how the idea came about doing scarves.
The following day, I used some of the most expensive silk that money can buy. I got to 277 of them. My hands were so beat up. So I went up to his suite, and I said, "Elvis, I've just gone as far as I can go. I can make a two-piece suit by the time I do this."
AJ said that the silk was very difficult, almost impossible to embroidery. I guess he said something to Elvis about the fact that they had to be done by hand.
I showed him my fingers, and he said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. He felt I've caused that." So I said, "No, it's not that. But anyway, I've got these 277 made." He just absolutely loved it. And he had on his ring, it says, "TCB is take care of business." And he said, "Hey, Tailor." And he pulled that ring off and gave me that ring.
And said, "I want you to have this for all the hard work that you're doing." That was the story he told me.
And I think that's why him and Elvis, that's how they get along, because you appreciate what people do for you and what you do for them. That makes the whole ball game.
A lot of you maybe don't know that. That's the story, and that's how the silk scarves came into Elvis Presley's act. The business increases absolutely tremendously during the next several months. And at this point is where the idea of opening the studios around the country came up.
So the mob said, "We're going to do something nice for you, AJ." So what they did was they said they would finance shops all over the country.
AJ, he was aware of who that loan was coming from, and that he would have to pay it back at some point. But he had the guts and fearlessness, and maybe naivete, to just go with it and see what would happen.
It is so hard to figure out when dealing with the mob how much they want to be legitimate and how much they're just talking a good game. And if they're going into the fashion business, that looks legitimate. But are they going to take something off the top or the bottom? Tailors can do both, I guess. So can the mob. The question in that case is going to be, just how much is AJ going to be controlled by them? Because he's gone in with them in business.
AJ was opening these stores, and you're going to try to create a brand under his name.
The mob, they financed 4, maybe 5 different shops in different parts of the country. A lot of these mafia guys are dangerous, tough people. It's a real dangerous type business.
I think legitimately, like with an AJ, they wanted to help him. They helped a lot of people without, shaking them down. But they knew they'd get repaid.
Probably took a lot of cocaine to work all 5 shops, I'd imagine.
I was almost working around the clock.
In those days, I'm not kidding you, Sal, I was doing my fashion work, I was doing the smuggling of fashion business. That's always been my true passion. Because without that, I would just be a plain drug smuggler. That was not the vision which I envisioned myself as wanting to be.
Still confused. Maybe he just wanted to make a lot of money fast and got into the drug business. He didn't need it. He didn't need to go into the drug business. He was playing a game, which I never thought he would do. You know, I knew him as the Tailor.
My main answer to the question, why, I put it this way, the cocaine. It enhanced my business, my fashion business, to such an incredible amount of volume. So there just wasn't anything left that I wasn't collecting money on. Of course, for years, not only was I a cocaine smuggler, I have now determined unconditionally that I was probably one of the best ones that ever. No one in the history of the drug business has ever had a setup like I had, where I had all of those working girls in Las Vegas, all of the pit bosses, all of the casino managers, and in many cases, the owners of the casinos, not only buying my fashion, but of course, being huge accounts in the cocaine.
And it could have really killed him if the Savellas and these guys found out. And you're in my house, forget about it.
So at this point, his cocaine business is thriving, his Tailor business is thriving, but at the end of the day, he was aware of the dangers around him because of what happened to him a couple years before.
I sit down one night, it must be around 2 a.m., and all of a sudden I hear boom, boom on my front door. I opened the door and immediately my heart flew to my throat. I had 5 very large badges staring me in the face, and they just shoved me aside and walked into my apartment. Everything flashed in front of my mind. I thought, oh my God, I've got my career going, everything is going great, and now I'm going to blow it all. I was scared to death.